purchase? Anyone has one, they can declare it now or when it arises. If none's declared, then we have one action item, and it's the Grey Bruce Paramedic Service Review. There's a report attached, and I'll turn it over to Ray.
Okay, thank you. I'll just briefly talk to the report, and then I'm going to bring up a presentation that was provided to us by the consultant part of this here. So, recommendation is that the attached report on the Grey Bruce Paramedic Service Shared Service Analysis be received for information purposes, and that staff will return with recommendations for potential implementation methods in regards to opportunities mentioned in the report. So back in January of 2016, when Chief Smith had announced his retirement, Grey and Bruce County Council directed the staffs to undertake paramedic services comparison, see if there's any efficiencies. It was a good time sort of a look at that, those options prior to moving forward with any other commitments. So some background work was undertaken by an operational committee that involved the director chiefs of both services, the QA people and operations people from both services, and also corporate services and treasury and some HR reps, the CAOs. And there was also direction given by the steering committee, which was the CAOs and wardens and the committee chairs from both counties. After that was done, Apex Pro Consulting was hired as a consultant, and then I'll bring up the report or the PowerPoint presentation, and that just goes over their consultant report and their peer review of the work that was done. So as I've already mentioned, it was in January 2016 when we started this work. And we did some background work on the service comparison analysis, some work on collective agreement comparison and the financial implications. After that, Apex Pro was hired as, through an RFP as a consultant firm to do a peer review of our work that was completed, as well as we were gave them approximately 9 questions, and I'll go through those in the slideshow of other aspects that maybe they could look at that were answered as well. So we did the background work, and they looked at the service comparison analysis and comparing the populations of both counties, the size of the counties, the number of calls that we do, the number of paramedics, the number of staffed hours, and any other programs we have, number of ambulances. Grey County in general is 25 maybe to 40% higher in different areas there. So that plays into some of the other numbers that we'll have here in a second. Again, we have similar demand profiles. They looked at our administrative structures and said that we're consistent to peers as being sort of lean administrative structures, similar scheduler supervisor ratios, and similar in the quality assurance training and operations measures. Response time targets are a little bit different in both counties, but in general meet the county's needs, again, partly due to the geography and the way they're laid out, so that those are still within reason of what other counties are doing. Also comparing what we had already found out was our budget. Bruce County is about 10.2 million, Gray's is about 13.8 million, approximately 35% larger, and that's reflective in the scale of their county and the number of their population as well. Our costs are very similar. 80% of our costs in both counties, most of that is due to salaries, wages, and benefits. 6 to 8% is administration, and the remaining 12 to 14% is medical equipment, supplies, vehicles, and buildings for the stations. They did do a peer analysis a little bit further in depth, and they looked at some other services, and they're listed at the bottom there. Population ranges from 45,000 to 115,000, so Chatham, Kent, Dufferin, Elgin, Haldimand, Huron, Kawartha Lakes, Leeds, Grenville, Muskoka, Norfolk, Oxford, Perth, Renfrew, and Stormont, Dundas, and Glengarry. Just to see how much they spend per resident and stuff, and also their cost per hour to run an ambulance. So we're consistent to peers at about $150 per resident, and both counties, Grey and Bruce, our costs are about $180 to $190 to operate an ambulance for 1 hour, and the median value around the peers is $190. So we're consistent with a lot of other areas. They looked at the collective agreement comparison. This is where a little bit of the costing came in and the amounts that it would be. typically when they look at this, and we had some other opinions on it as well, just to make sure we were in line with what we were thinking. But if we were to align collective agreements, then typically what would happen is the staff would get the best of both worlds. So you got to look at both agreements and bring those up to the same amount. So for Bruce County, additional cost to us, we estimated about $328,000 per year. The consultant actually thought that it would probably be a bit higher and closer to about $450,000 a year more to bring us up to Grey County's collective agreement. And then in Grey County, they would also have costs as well. Theirs would have to bring their staff up about another $70,000 a year to get to the same amounts. So one of the questions that they answered in this is also, would it be any purpose in aligning our collective agreements? And they basically said for the amount of money it was going to cost, would there be any point in working through that with such a high monetary cost? They answered that a little bit more in one of the further slides here as well. So as I mentioned, there were about 9 questions that we had also asked them to try and work out for us. If there's any efficiencies to be gained by sharing service delivery. And they said yes, there were a few. They recognize we already do some of that work. Some aspects of the ambulance service delivery, the cross-border standby emergency coverage. We do try and look at some sort of joint tendering occasionally when we do some equipment, and medical supply purchasing, and our oxygen vendor. To our peers, our services do operate efficiently in their eyes. Our expenditures per resident, cost per hour, and response time performance all fell in line with our peers. What they did recognize is maybe some efficiencies would be in our fleet management areas. Grey County does their fleet management in-house, and we do ours with a third-party RFP. And so that was one where we could maybe look at a little bit more. And the other one was some in-service training. If we're doing training in Bruce County and we're doing training in Grey County, we do share a few part-time, full-time staff. Would it make sense to do the same training and therefore realize some of those efficiencies, whether that's just in being able to not necessarily have to drive as far to go to the training, and if we are sharing staff, they only have to do it once, they don't have to do it twice, and it's costing both of us the same money if people are getting the same training. Another question we asked her, is there any best practices to guide potential sharing of services? Not a whole lot out there. There's a couple different ones that are out there. There's some formal arrangements. Simcoe County provides the paramedic service for the city of Barrie and the city of Orillia. Similarly, Frontenac County does that for the city of Kingston. There are some lower tier municipalities that actually deliver it for the upper tier. Guelph provides it for all of Wellington County as well, and city of Cornwall does it for Stormont, Dundas, and Glengarry. But there's not very many that do arrangements like that. Some atypical arrangements, there's one example they had of an upper tier municipality for another upper tier. Excuse me, Hastings County provides the services for Prince Edward County. And they had one example of Middlesex London, where it's a municipal authority or a shared service board type of arrangement where they work together and they both have a say as to how paramedic services are delivered for both the county of Middlesex and London, the city. So initially, when the downloading first happened, there was a municipal cooperative. And about 4 counties got together and said, hey, let's just have one group and do it all. That didn't last very long with competing priorities in the different counties. They really recognized that that didn't work. So that didn't last very long. And that was the only other example that the consultant could think of. But they did say there are quite a few other informal arrangements where there's a couple paramedic services work together and similar to what we are doing. So joint tendering on equipment, medical supplies, oxygen vehicles. Another question was, is there an opportunity to reduce duplication by sharing services? They really didn't think so in this instance. We have similar administrative structures. It's possible if you merge services, you'd get rid of one chief position, but then that person would have to report to 2 different councils, deal with different financial reporting processes more, so you may actually need another management level full-time equivalent to help compensate for the extra workload. And they also mentioned something that we hadn't considered a whole lot was one county taking on the other one. That's another 100 or so, or possibly more staff. Additional pressures to other county departments like HR and payroll to try and account for those number of staff as well. So, are there opportunities to reduce any liabilities by sharing services? They didn't believe there would be. Sharing the service delivery doesn't relieve one county from another from your responsibilities within the jurisdiction. So each county is the provincial delivery agent for a jurisdiction. So low-risk collaborations for tendering for medical equipment and medical supplies wouldn't be a big issue, but higher-risk functions could, things like scheduling, when we have 2 different collective agreements, 2 different scheduling programs, 2 different payroll systems, and quality assurance, ensuring that everybody's looking at everybody's criminal record checks and other provincially required paperwork that has to be in. You're taking on a higher risk in trying to have one county do it for the other one is the way they looked at it. So a little bit more to be considered in those areas. Is there an opportunity to increase service levels or improve access to services? This goes back to basically their recommendations. Look again a little bit more at fleet management and in-service training, and continue with what we are already doing on looking at some of the cost savings when we maybe purchase medical supplies and oxygen and things. So, the 6th question, is there an opportunity to leverage additional grants by sharing services? They didn't know of many grants that are out there for paramedic services, and the one caution they did put out there is that the Ministry of Health basically gives you a 50% grant. So if we start finding funding elsewhere, then the province will just decrease the amount that you're getting back from the province in the end as well. So it's one of those things just to be aware of. If we find additional funding, then the province may cut the amount that they actually give back anyway. So, could sharing services equalize service delivery or provide for a more consistent delivery of services? Basically, we're performing at our response time targets. They meet what we are needing for each county, and they're appropriate to the needs of each county. Sharing services won't equalize those at all unless directed by council. If you want more vehicles out there or whatever, then that's going to change the service delivery models, and it'll be determined basically by the respective councils. Is there an opportunity for overall cost savings? They didn't believe they thought relatively little opportunity for cost savings. If they were to be aligned, and as we had already mentioned, there would be cost to increase by aligning the collective agreements. We operate fairly efficiently at $150 per resident. That's consistent with peers. The variance in the budgets right now of about 35% is attributed to the scale of the counties and not discretionary spending. And as I mentioned, most of those budgets are fixed, and 90% of that is the salaries, wages, benefits, and the medical equipment, supplies, and things. So I've already mentioned the other ones, just looking at the fleet management in-service training. And is it worth aligning the collective agreements in future negotiations? They didn't think there was much purpose in doing that, and if we were to look at that, start with the non-monetary agreements. Even when we start trying to do a collective, to align them, if we were to do that, then union reps probably would start asking for even more concessions just to get them aligned. So that's what their opinion was on those, that there's really not much point in doing that type of thing right now. So that's basically the report that we have, and like I said, there was the 2 recommendations as far as looking at shared training and possibly looking at how we deliver the fleet maintenance reports. So,
Thank you, Ray. There's a recommendation here, then I'll get it on the floor and then we'll have any discussion. The recommendation is that the attached report on the Grey Bruce Paramedic Service Shared Services Analysis be received for information purposes, and that staff will return with recommendations for potential implementation methods in regards to the opportunities mentioned in the report. Mover and Ann, Paul, any discussion? I think we met 3 times, Kelly, isn't that correct? Yeah, the first couple of times, the staff put a great deal of effort into doing the original analysis, and then we decided to go with the consultant to really, I guess, kind of peer review what was done, and they came back and they were almost identical to what we had said when we met. So I say that because I know that Kelly and the Grey County CAO and staff put a great deal of effort into analyzing all of that information and getting it to us. So, no questions, then I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Yes.
Just a question. And it's the information in the report here. And it's the cost. in that chart you gave us, Ray, with the 150. What I'm really interested in is these ones at about $100, which is a third of them. And there's 8 below our costs. And how do they do it? Like, what are they doing that?
Can I just say that's a good question?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the way they've done it, it's hard for me to even tell which. They're not done in alphabetical order in the ones they have here, so I'd have to go back to the consultant and figure out. They didn't want, when they asked for them to release the information, it wasn't to say one county does it over another county. We can try and poll them and see whether they'll let us look at some of that information and actually find out which ones, and then work with them to see if there's cheaper ways. But from the report, I wouldn't know which counties are the lower ones at this time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just...
Through you, Mr. Chair, the one area that when we reviewed the information that I thought would be an interesting step to take would be to start with the FIRs, because a couple of those communities are single tier, and whether or not they get economies of scale by having all of the emergency services together, I don't know. But I do think it would be valuable to take those communities and just look at their FIRs, which is fully public information, and see if it points us in any direction.
Yeah, it's be worth looking at anyway.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, then the next item on the agenda is a closed meeting. And I'll take a motion, and I'll read the reasons. Milt, seconded by Robert. So it's moved by Milt, seconded by Robert. The committee move into closed meeting to receive the Grey Bruce Paramedic Services Review Analysis pursuant to Section 2B of the Municipal Act related to personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees. All in favor? That's it. It's carried. We're